everyone, today I am going to show you how to insert an invisible zipper into a one-piece garment that has a bodice lining. This is part of my Audi Playsuit pattern sew-along, but you could use this tutorial to insert a zipper into any dress with a lined bodice or any other jumpsuit pattern that has a lined bodice. This is not covering a garment that has a full lining. It just has a bodice in the top, a lining in the top part of the garment. So of course you're going to need your invisible zipper. We have our garment here with the center back open, and I am going to use an invisible zipper foot, which you will see whenever I zoom in a little closer. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my zipper, and to make sure that I'm sewing it in correctly, I just lay it face up so the zipper pull is facing upwards and the garment is right side out. And I'm looking at where the zipper is going to go into. And you're just going to flip the zipper over on the corresponding sides. So the left side of the zipper is going to be flipped over and sewn to this left opening, and vice versa for this side. But we're going to just sew one opening at a time. So we're going to start with this left side. Okie dokie, so here I am set up with my invisible zipper foot, and we are going to start on the left side of the garment. I'm going to line up my zipper tape with the top of my zipper tape with the top of my garment edge, and it is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I just want to make sure that the edge of my fabric stays at the 1/2 inch line on my machine, which is going to put my zipper right about here if I'm lining up the teeth with this second little hole slot of my invisible zipper foot. So I'm going to keep in mind this gap is what the jumpsuit wants to have between, if everything is lined up correctly. So I'm going to lift my foot and place the zipper so that the teeth are lined up to go into this little tunnel right here. And I like to kind of push my teeth open a little bit. That's going to help it really catch as we get going. Be sure to back stitch. And you can see I press my teeth open, and the side of my teeth is going to be held open by this middle part of the zipper. And I'm just going to keep on stitching. Again, make sure that the edge of your fabric stays at that 1/2 inch mark. As we get to the waist seam, I want to make sure that my seam allowance is flipped upwards. If you did your pressing in the last step, it should still be flipped upwards, but sometimes when you're sewing, your machine can push it out of the way. So just make sure that seam allowance stays flipped upwards. And I'm going to stitch this all the way down to where my center back seam is closed. Now you'll notice that I'm losing my fabric at the 1/2 inch mark, and that's because I've serged this edge already after it was stitched. So I know that I want to line up the zipper tape with this stitch line right here, the zipper teeth. This is where I want it to end. But I must have unintentionally trimmed off a little bit more in my serging than I wanted to. So at the bottom, you want to not worry so much about, especially if you've serged, not worry so much about this seam allowance and worry about lining up your zipper teeth with that stitch line opening where your center back opens up to allow for the zipper. And I'm gonna go pretty close to where that stitch line is. There's a little bit of a gap. Okay, so now we have installed 1/2 of our zipper. Now before we go on to the other half, we want to set ourselves up for success. So I'm going to zip up this zipper, and right where my waistline is, I'm going to do a chalk mark or a pen mark, whatever you have, on the side of the zipper that's not sewn in yet. This is going to give us a guide to make sure and help us be able to really have a nice, neat matching points when we sew in the other side. So let's unzip that and make sure that we're not getting it twisted here. So let's plop our other side back up, and we're just flipping that over and stitching it to the other side. So I also already pressed this a little bit, which kind of helps me see where that seam allowance is. So you may want to do that as well. Again, the zipper tape is lining up at the top. However, we want to make sure that when that zipper tape lines up at the top, our mark is also lining up where it's supposed to be. On the second side, I would go with the mark rather than the zipper tape. So if your zipper tape ends up, like in this case, when I put my mark here, my zipper tape wants to be, let's see, just a touch lower than the fabric, which can happen like whenever you're sewing it on. You can kind of not intentionally push your zipper down. Okay, and we're just going to do the same thing on this side. Push that teeth out of the way so that your foot can do its job. Sometimes if your zipper stop is a little bit low down, you might have to kind of help it through the tunnel there. And you can see that my mark is lining up right with my seam line, which is exactly what I want. My seam allowance underneath is pressed upwards. And again, I'm going to just stitch this all the way down. As you can see, I do not use pins. It takes a little more fiddling, but I find the fiddling takes less time than the pinning. Get that as close to that point as you can. Back stitch. Okay, let's zoom back out and see what we got going on here. Okie dokie. We have inserted our zipper. Let's get our pull. And now, as you can see, we have a perfectly matching center back line, and it zips up very nicely. I don't love my invisible zipper foot because, as you can see, it doesn't really get as close to the teeth as I would like, but I usually just press it in place. My invisible zipper foot on my old machine was actually much better. But moving on, now we are going to attach the lining to the bodice. And what we want to do here is open up the zipper so it's flat, not folded back. Open that up and do the same on the lining. And we're going to stitch all the way around the neckline of the bodice. And in this instance, for this pattern, this is also the step where our straps are inserted, so I will be doing that as well. Now, you may have your straps basted in place. I usually just kind of stitch them in as I go, so you will see that demonstrated here as well. One more step I forgot to mention for the zipper. We are going to close up the zipper and fold this flat. Okay, before we attach the bodice, we need to close up the point where the end of the zipper meets the center back seam. If you can see here, the end of the zipper stitching ends here, while the end of the center back stitching ends down here. There's a little bit of a gap there. We don't want that because you won't really be able to see anything through the gap, but it creates some, it lacks strength whenever the stitches are not connected, especially in a place where it's going to be strained when you sit, because it's pretty much right at the hip line. So we want to close that gap, and by doing that, you're going to use a regular zipper foot that is one-sided so that you can stitch right up next to those zipper teeth. And we're going to fold these teeth out of the way and just stitch a short line connecting from just above where your zipper teeth stitching ends right down to just below where your center back stitching starts. Okay, so as you can see, I've folded this tape out of the way. I'm going to drop my foot and just stitch until I can connect into the center back stitching. Just a short stitch connecting from here to here. Now, you won't be able to get right on top of that zipper stitching. It's going to be about 1/8 of an inch to the inside, which is totally fine. You won't be able to tell from the front. Okay, now let's put in our regular foot. And we have quite a significant tail here on our zipper, so I am just going to create a new zipper stop for that and clip that off. Note to self, do not do this if you have a metal toothed zipper, although those do not exist for invisible zippers. So if you're using the correct zipper, it won't be a problem. We are going to connect our lining to our self fabric. So again, laying this zipper part flat, laying this lining flat on top of it, and stitching at 1/2 inch. That is what this seam allowance is. You're going to go right over the tape there. There's plenty of room from the top of that zipper As I get close to where the strap goes, I am just going to place that in its place. Make sure I like to go over the strap extra just to make sure it's gonna stay where it's supposed to. Working our way around the whole top, making sure that we're lining up at all of our seam lines and our seam allowances are staying pressed open. So as I get to the point where the other end of my strap needs to go in, I just reach inside, grab for that strap, make sure that I'm not twisting it, and pull it up to where it needs to go. It should fall kind of right in the center of this top area. Make sure those points line up really nicely. Some of you are probably having a heart attack watching me sew all willy-nilly with no pins or anything. But this is how I like to do it. Fast and loose. All right, as we come up to this other side, when we go back the other way, we're going to be putting in the strap opposite. So on the way here, we did the back first and then the front, and on the way back, we're going to do the front first and then the back. So just placing that strap where it needs to go. Okay, I'm coming up to where my strap goes in. So I'm going to reach into the front, pull that strap, make sure it's not twisted, place it in place. And as you come around to the other side, you're going to finish the same way we started. With everything flat, flat, flat. And we're just sewing right over the top of that zipper. Okay, now we have our bodice all connected. You'll notice with the strap in there, you won't really be able to lay it flat. But now we want to go and clip all of our corners. As well as notch into our curved arm seams, underarm seams. And in your V-neck, do one notch straight into the V. Don't go through the stitching. Okay, don't clip your zipper corner yet, which is this corner right here, because we are going to put our zipper foot back on, which is this foot that has the one-sided petal, and we are going to sew our center back closed. Unzip our zipper so we have plenty of room. So right now we only stitched across the top neckline area, and this center back is just flapping open. But we want a nice clean finish with that zipper and our lining. So lay it flat, match up your center back seams. At the bottom, fold up that seam allowance about 1/2 inch, because that is going to get, going the wrong way. You want the foot to be on the seam allowance side of your body. All right, so we can kind of feel the zipper tape under here. You don't want to sew onto the zipper tape. This foot is going to help us to sew close to the zipper tape without sewing over it. So if you haven't pressed this up already, which I think actually the seam allowance, the instructions have you stop and press this up first. But if you haven't, like me, and you're just doing this all in one go, be sure to fold this up, this bottom seam allowance up 1/2 inch. Don't fold it up past where you can see the waistline. You want it to be a little bit covering the waistline. And we're just going to sew that all the way down. Now we have a nice, clean, finished back. And you'll notice that if we fold this back and down, we can flip this out, get a really nice point there. And then we have a little bit of room where our stop is, and that's where we're going to sew the hook and eye. You can also clip this corner. I do sometimes. I don't clip it as close as other corners just because the zipper is right up in there. So let's do that on the other side. Really should have gotten my zipper foot that's facing the other way for this, but maybe it helps you guys to see it better this way. All right, on the other side, you're going to be starting from the bottom of your bodice. So start with that folded up part. Make sure you go all the way to the bottom of the fabric. Make sure your center backs are lined up. And go all the way to the top. And now you have a nice, clean, finished zipper on the inside of your bodice. And when you press this, you want to press the lining away from the zipper as nicely as you can. You don't want that getting caught in there. And our next step would be to understitch all of this while it's still open. You're going to pull it apart and along all of the neckline, getting as close to the straps as you can. You're going to stitch just on the inside of the lining, catching the seam allowance underneath. And that's going to help you get a nice clean finished top of your garment. And then we'll just be stitching it closed, and you will have a finished Audi playsuit after you do the hem. But this tutorial is just for inserting that zipper. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and be sure to check out the links below to see the rest of the Audi Playsuit sew along, as well as where you can purchase the Audi Playsuit PDF pattern. Happy sewing! Bye!